Okay. Okay, let's begin our sharing session tonight. Let me open the slides first. Can you see the slides, Doctor?
I can, yes, thanks.
Okay. Okay, okay, let's begin. Good evening to everyone in Malaysia, and of course, good morning to our esteemed guest speaker tonight, live from the United States. Um, Before we proceed further, allow me to briefly set the stage. The 2024 US presidential election was, as many have anticipated, a defining moment in American political history. With key issues such as economic recovery, immigration, climate change, and America's role in the international system shaping public discourse, the election offered not only insight into domestic priorities, but also sent important signals to the world, especially in the context of great power competition and global alliances. Tonight, we are honored to have with us a distinguished expert in political science from the US. We are truly grateful for your presence and for your willingness to share your scholarly perspective on the current trajectory of American politics and what it means for the broader international community. Allow me to briefly introduce myself. My name is Muhammad Aidil Farhan. You can call me Aidil. Currently a third year and final semester student at University Utara Malaysia, UUM, or otherwise known as Northern University of Malaysia, located in the state of Kedah, exactly next to Thailand, southern Thailand. So I am as I said, I'm a major in international affairs management, uh, concentrating on international law and diplomacy. I'm also currently writing my final year thesis, otherwise known as academic research paper, uh, on the strategic competition between the US and China. So without further ado, let's continue with by introduction of our guest speaker tonight or today. It's in US. Okay. So please welcome Dr. Elizabeth Theiss-Morse. She is currently a professor of political science at University of Nebraska Lincoln. She received both her Bachelor of Arts in History and PhD in Political Science at University of Minnesota in 1982 and 1989, respectively. Her research areas mostly focused on public opinion, political psychology, and political behavior. She has received several awards, which include 5 National Science Foundation grants, Distinguished Teaching Award, James O'Hanlon Academic Leader Award, and several book awards, including the Fenner Award and 2 Robert Lane Awards. And and then she also has co-written a book titled Respect and Loathing in American Democracy last year with political theorist at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Jeff Spinner-Halef. She discussed on how modern partisans struggle to respect their political rivals, which I think, in my opinion, is something that is contemporary in the current domestic US politics. And actually, there is a YouTube video of her discussion on this book, along with Jeff Spinner-Halef, on the very ABC News 5:30 at podcast. And for the participants, I will share the YouTube video link after this session. Without further ado, let's continue with the summary of this uh, talk. So, in your own words, Doctor, can you begin by giving us the background, the summary of what is the 2024 United States presidential election in your own words. So
Yeah.
the floor is yours, Doctor.
Well, thank you, Aidil, for that wonderful introduction and for inviting me to talk with you today. I really appreciate it. So the 2024 presidential election was just plain weird. I mean, there were so many things that were different from any other election we have ever had here in the United States. On the one hand, we have a former president who is running for a second term, who is a convicted felon, and he he had a number of court cases going at the time of the election. He I don't know if he led, but he certainly encouraged an insurrection to try to overturn the 2020 election results. So this was just weird. And then we have on the other side a sitting president who clearly is declining in terms of his cognitive capacity. His debate was horrendous. And then he drops out of the presidential race after the primary season. So suddenly the Democratic Party is without a candidate, and Kamala Harris gets the nod from Democrats, but not through a primary system. She has to run a campaign, set up and then run a campaign in a very short amount of time without having had the kind of the practice of working through a full primary season and getting a lot of people behind her. And so we end up with a race, that is just plain weird. I mean, I can't describe it any other way. But even given that, I would say that the fundamentals of political science research on elections held. I mean, it's just the case that even long before we even knew who the candidates would be, political scientists were predicting a Republican win in the election. And the reason is that we had an economy that people were not happy with. We had presidential approval ratings for President Biden extremely low. His favorability rating was only 37 at the time that we had the election. And it's no surprise, I think, that Donald Trump won given that. So anyway, that's my summary of the election. I mean, the swing states went for Trump, but that's not surprising given these fundamentals, I would say.
Okay, thank you for that, Doctor. So yeah, I think this race is something I would agree. It is weird, but yeah, but I took this course of American politics and foreign policy here at UUM, and we're actually been widely discussing about these elections. And we'd also seen some polls showing that it was a very close race. But yeah, I think you are well aware of that, Doctor, that has this 13 keys to White House. I forgot his name, Doctor, but he was famous for predicting these elections and getting it correctly every time. But this time he get it wrong. So yeah, I think this is weird. And looking at the map, we can see that many states here, especially in swing states, has been won by Donald Trump. So I think this is something that pretty, I don't know. I mean, I don't expect it. What do you think, Doctor?
So I expected Trump to win. So while a lot of people who were around me were saying, oh, Harris has got this, she's going to pull it out. This is going to work for the Democrats. I just kept saying, no, I think Trump is going to win only because of the state of the economy and Biden's approval rating. I mean, the Democrats were not appealing to people, and people were incredibly upset about things like egg prices here, which had gone up. And, just going to the grocery store, the costs had increased a lot, and that hits people's pocketbooks, and they were concerned about what was going on.
Doctor. Okay, thank you for that, Doctor. Now moving on to the first guided questions that have been prepared. So for the first question, so we would like to know, why was President Biden's decision to withdraw from the 2024 race viewed as disastrous for the Democratic Party both strategically and institutionally. So you think that President Biden actually should stay in the race, or should he leave the race? What do you think, Doctor?
So I think it was disastrous in this sense. If he had left the race, if he had decided not to run for a second term, so in the third year of his presidency, if he had said, I'm not running for reelection, it would have been hard on him because he would have been a lame duck president. But a lot of Democrats could then have started their campaign to try to win the hearts and minds of the American people, and presumably the most popular candidate would have won. So in that sense, I think it was a disaster that he withdrew when he did, not that he withdrew. I think he should have withdrawn earlier. And by not withdrawing when he did, we know from a lot of discussion after the fact that many people within his inner circle knew that he was declining cognitively, that he was just not, physically he wasn't strong, but cognitively he was just having a tough time. And now there is a lot of distrust among the American people for the Democratic Party. I think it makes it hard for Kamala Harris to run in 2028 because she was one who said, no, he's doing fine. But we know that he wasn't. So in that sense, I think it was a disaster. I don't think it's disastrous in and of itself that he withdrew from the race. As I said earlier, if we base our predictions on what political scientists focus on, the Republicans were going to win this race regardless who was running. It didn't matter if it was Biden or Harris. It didn't matter if it was Trump or somebody else. The Republicans were in line to win the race. And so in that sense, I don't think it matters. I do think that the Democrats are really in trouble right now. I think they are really in trouble because they hid this and they're not trusted and they're not offering a clear message to the American people about how they want to move forward.
Thank you for that, Doctor. I'd really like to know. So you stay in Nebraska, specifically in Lincoln, the state's capital city. So I'd really like to know. Nebraska is one of the states in the U.S. to have these types of allocation of electoral votes. So I am quite curious about how Kamala Harris still managed to win that one electoral vote in Nebraska. I mean, the final results was disastrous, of course, but how did she manage to still win the Nebraska's second congressional district? What is your opinion on that?
Yeah. So as you said, so the Electoral College, the way it's set up is that most states, 48 states, have a winner-take-all system. So whoever wins the most votes in the state win all of the state's Electoral College votes, which is a problem, and I'm happy to talk about it. There are real problems with that approach. But two states, Maine and Nebraska, have a system where two of the state's Electoral College votes go with whatever the overall state vote is. But however many congressional districts they have, the Electoral College vote goes with that electoral district. So in Maine, it's a Democratic state. So Democrats, Kamala Harris won statewide, so she got those two Electoral College votes that correspond to the Senate. And then the two congressional districts divided between Trump and Harris. So she ended up winning 3 Electoral College votes in Maine, and Trump won 1. So in Nebraska, our little blue dot in Nebraska. So Nebraska is a very, very Republican state. It too does the same thing. Its statewide votes went for Trump, and then 2 of its 3 congressional district votes went for Trump. So he got 4, and then Harris got 1, which is this blue dot. So why? I mean, what the heck is going on? So the Omaha area is quite liberal compared to the rest of the state. So Lincoln is liberal as well, and tends to vote Democratic, but it is a small part of the first district, first congressional district. But Omaha basically makes up all of District 2, and it's very evenly divided between Democrats and Republicans. But people who live in Omaha were very unhappy with Donald Trump's presidency. So to me, it wasn't a surprise that they voted for Harris. They have voted for Democrats at times. They voted for Trump in 2016, but they voted for Obama in 2008. So there have been times when it's been kind of bouncing back and forth. But because we have this really weird electoral college system in our state, it's just different from how the rest of the country works.
I gotta agree with that, Doctor, because yeah, I mean, but I think how both Nebraska and Maine approaching this types of allocation of EVs are pretty democratic in my opinion. It's quite fair, and given that the state of Nebraska has a history of how do you say emphasize on the nonpartisan, especially in its legislature, right, Doctor?
Yes, that's correct.
Like could you explain it to our participants on the Nebraska legislature?
So Nebraska is weird in many ways. And one other way that you just mentioned that it's weird is that it has a one-party state legislature, what's called a unicameral. So most states have a bicameral legislature where they have a House and a Senate. In the state of Nebraska, we just have one body that's our legislative body. It has 49 senators, and that's it. That's our whole legislature in the state of Nebraska. And an additional weirdness is that it is nonpartisan. That is, when people run for seats in the state legislature, they don't have a party attached to their name on the ballot. So it's a nonpartisan legislature. And within the legislature, the parties do not basically set up the structure of the system. So the parties do not have a role in how the legislature works, how it's elected, all that kind of stuff. Having said that, however, the unicameral, what we call the unicameral, has become much more partisan over time. And that's not surprising given the polarization in the United States. So while people are not elected by party, nor are they organized by party within the chamber, we're told ahead of time what the partisanship is of each person running. And people tend to vote the party line, even for those legislators, even if it's nonpartisan. And we see the Democrats in the legislature often voting as a bloc against the Republicans in the legislature. And because they make up a small number of legislators, they lose all the time.
Okay, let's continue with the second question. Thank you for that, Doctor. I mean, yeah, I mean, I really want to have the participants to know of how unique Nebraska is, because people people have been calling me my friends because I love U.S. politics so much, and they called me Senator of Nebraska, basically. I mean, it's funny. It's because I just randomly said the state, and they just called me that from back then until now. Yeah, I mean, it stuck with me basically. Yeah.
That's great. It is a wonderful state. I like being different, you know. I
Yeah.
like to be
Yeah, the
different.
Cornhusker state is the best.
Exactly.
Okay, let's continue with the second question. What were the critical strategies and conditions that enabled Donald Trump to recapture key swing states like Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania? We really want to know how does Donald Trump has this ability to win these states? Even we see that in the 2022 midterm, we see that many many politicians, Democratic politicians, won statewide elections in several of these swing states like Michigan, Governor Whitmer won re-election. In Georgia, Senator Warnock won re-election. Arizona, they elected most of their statewide public officials are Democrats. So this is interesting. Like, I thought this was in an indicator that Democrats would maintain this type of how do you say this momentum. But really, when it comes to 2024, it basically contrasts of what we're actually expecting. What do you say, Doctor?
Yeah. So we have very, very few swing states. Most states just overwhelmingly go for one party or the other. We always know that California is going to vote for the Democrat, and we always know that Texas is going to vote for the Republican. And so, the number of swing states is very, very small. So what that means, so obviously that means that the partisan makeup of the states is very close. You very much have just a small number of people who are basically deciding the election. And that's a problem, I have to say. I do think that that's a major issue in state politics. So why was Trump able to win the swing states? I think part of it is that the swing states tend to be states that have a lot more working class people who were hit hard by the economic troubles that the Biden administration had. And so they were hit hard by that. Also, if you think about a swing state, two things are going to decide the outcome. Partisans are going to vote for their party. And we know that from the 2024 election. Democrats voted for Harris and Republicans voted for Trump overwhelmingly. So the people who are going to decide the election are independents. That's one thing, right? So which way are the independents going to go? Independents are going to go with they're going to vote they're going to vote against the person who they don't like and who's giving them bad economic conditions. And a key issue in the election was immigration. And a lot of people in the swing states were upset with Biden's immigration policy. So that's going to move things. So anyway, I think that's part of it. The other part of the swing states is who gets the vote out, right? So which party gets the vote out? And we know that voter turnout was lower in the 2024 election than in the 2020 election. So given that, I think there's some indication that Democrats were just less able to get the vote out than Republicans were. And since it's a swing state, since all of these are swing states, it's able to move even just a little bit and change the outcome of the election.
Okay. Yeah, I think that played major roles, like, voter turnout. And really, I think that states like maybe this swing states has this tendency to have a much lower voter turnout, especially during midterm elections. But yeah, I think this mentioned swing states are really important to both parties, and especially like there are some. I actually have some states that I still think has some potentials to be how do you say swing states, like Iowa. Iowa is a state that I don't know, it drastically went to Republican into 2016, but I don't know, I do think that I still has hope, especially when I see the 2018 midterm elections in which Democrats won the majority of House seats in Iowa, which is something that is quite incredible, because I think that is an indicator of me to, have this kind of, I'm not hope. I think I'm basically neutral on this, but yeah, I think Iowa has this tendency to be still a swing state in my opinion, but for presidential, I don't think so. Maybe not very much, but the Senate race, the governorship, and other races that we will have in the next midterm elections in 2026. But yeah, Maybe North Carolina as well. What do you think, Doctor? Maybe North Carolina, maybe Democrats will win big in the next midterm elections, especially in its Senate race. Because yeah, I think North Carolina Senator Thom Tillis is really someone that is quite unpopular in both parties, actually. And really, I do think that he might lose this election. What do you think, Doctor, in North Carolina? Because
Yeah, go ahead.
I like North Carolina because they elected their governor with wide margin, a Democratic governor. So what do you think, Doctor?
Yeah, I mean, so I think I disagree with you on Iowa. I mean, I think part of the issue, and it also affects North Carolina, but to a lesser extent, I would say. But right now, the Democratic Party is associated with very socially liberal policies. And I think that places like Iowa could be convinced that they should vote more Democratic, even at the federal level. Um, if the Democrats could appeal to um, rural people, not necessarily agriculture people, but people who live in rural areas, and they haven't done so because people in rural areas tend to be a bit more socially conservative, and so I just don't see how that plays out. I do think that what we will see in North Carolina will be heavily influenced by how people interpret what Trump is doing now in his presidency. And if he is seen as just, introducing chaos into everything, making the economy tank, making, just if it makes us more vulnerable internationally, then there will be a lot of Democrats who get out to vote in the midterms, and that will increase the chances that Democrats will win. On the flip side, if Trump does really well, and
Yeah.
somehow he is able to turn this around, then Republicans will win.
Okay, Doctor. Okay, just a quick question. In 2026 midterm elections, House and Senate, who will control? What do you think, Doctor?
I think again it depends. So I think it again depends on how Trump does and how the economy is doing at the time of the midterm elections. If the economy is really struggling, then the Republicans are going to be in trouble. It's just true. But also, Democrats have a harder time this upcoming midterm election in the Senate because more seats that are safe for Republicans are up for reelection. Because the Senate reelections in the Senate are Senate terms are 6 years, and we have a third of the Senate going up for reelection every 2 years. So it just happens that for this midterm election, safer Republican seats are up for reelection. So we'll see what happens. I mean, who knows? If people are really upset at Trump, that it could shake that. I mean, even in Nebraska, we have Senator Pete Ricketts going up for reelection, and already the independent candidate who ran against Deb Fischer in this last election is talking about running in the midterms, and he did really well against Fischer. Fischer won by only about 5 points, which is unheard of in a heavily Republican state. So it could be that good candidates run against the Republicans, and it turns it around. In the House, it's so much. House districts are so gerrymandered right now, and so most states have their state legislatures decide on what the congressional district boundaries will be, and they draw them so that their party wins. And that's just a huge, I mean, if I could change, one of the things I would change, aside from campaign financing, I would change how redistricting is done, because it just makes it impossible for the minority party to even get close.
Well, I have to agree with you, Doctor, because there are a lot of things in US that need changes, especially gerrymandering. I do believe that independent commissions must do the redistricting.
I,
So
I agree with you. Yes.
Okay, let's move to the third question. Third party candidates in the election, 2024 presidential election, like RFK Jr., Cornel West. To be honest, I don't actually remember that well who Cornel West is, but RFK Jr. RFK Jr. is, I don't know, he carried that his family name, the Kennedy name, but yet his family is against him. So this is something that is truly unique because it brought this elite political family into the spotlight again. But yet, um, he brought it in a different perspective. So really, it's something that shocked a lot of Americans, especially the Kennedy family itself. So, so what do you think, Doctor? Does the third party candidates affected this election so much? Not only their candidacy, but to the election itself. What do you think, Doctor?
Yeah. So third parties historically have had a really, really hard time winning, at the presidential level. So the last time a third party candidate won any electoral college votes was 1968 with George Wallace. So it's just hard. I mean, Ross Perot won 19% of the vote in 1992, and he got 0 electoral college votes. And the reason for that is that you have to win a state to get electoral college votes, unless you're in Maine or Nebraska, where you could win a district. But you have to win. You really have to win the statewide vote in 48 of the states. So that is tough. And so in this last election in 2024, Trump won about 77 million votes. Harris won, what was it, 75 million votes, something like that. And all of the third party candidates combined won under 3 million votes, which is 1.85% of the vote. I mean, they just won a very small amount. So the only time that third party candidates can make a difference is if they pull votes away from one of the parties, and just enough, since it's a winner take all system in the electoral college, they'd have to pull away just enough votes to be able to, mess up with that outcome. And that did not happen in 2024. There was no place where it was close enough where the third parties, drew enough away from one party to win. The major last time that happened was in 2000, when George W. Bush beat Al Gore, and it was decided by Texas, and Ralph Nader had won a pretty significant percentage of like 3% of the vote, which would have given the election to Gore if that hadn't happened.
When you mentioned the Clinton's elections in 1992, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yeah.
You mentioned that Ross Perot. When I remembered back the election results of that particular election, it's really something that is quite rare, and I believe it won't happen again in the near future. But really, you think, in your opinion, would George Senior would win the election if there's no Ross Perot? What do you think, Doctor?
I do think so. Well, so there's some divided opinion on this among political scientists, and so it's hard to say. So on the one hand, Ross Perot was somewhat conservative, so you would think he would be pulling votes away from George H.W. Bush, and that's what I think happened. So I think, yes, if Ross Perot had not been in the race, George H.W. Bush would have had a second term. On the other hand, if people wanted to vote for George H.W. Bush, they would have, because so I don't know if those people who were frustrated with the sitting president, George H.W. Bush at the time, if they would have voted for Clinton because they were just upset with Bush and his economic policy. Again, it always goes back to economic policy, but but my own gut feeling is that Bush would have won in that race in 1992.
I see. Thank you for that, Doctor. Really, so still in this question, uh, do you think that RFK Jr. shift to Donald Trump actually helped Donald Trump to actually win this election? Do you think RFK Jr. has this type um of vote pooling type of energy to gain more tractions for the Republicans to win the presidency? What do you think, Doctor?
Well, I mean, you're right to point out that RFK Jr. is from the Kennedy family, and I mean a lot of Americans just think very highly of the Kennedys and like what they have done. The Kennedys were also very controversial, though, so there's a lot of things about the Kennedys that people don't like. On the other hand, so RFK Jr., that specific question, I don't think it made a difference for Trump, and the reason is, as you pointed out, that his family came out really strongly against him. And a lot of the things that he says are very controversial. The news came out that he had a worm in his brain, and I mean, just all this just weird stuff. So I tend not to think that he influenced the outcome of the election.
Okay, thank you for that, Doctor. Yeah, I do believe that he is a weird guy. I mean, I thought Kennedy would be someone that, I love Kennedy. I knew Kennedy since I was 15, I think, 14. So it really resonated with me to have another Kennedy to be yet again in the spotlight for presidential election. Yet it's a new breed, a weird type of breed, Kennedy. So I don't know. I was feeling kind of upset. I know
Yeah,
it's just childish admiration of
sure.
the Kennedy family, of course, of his legacy, the legacy, of course. But
Yeah.
when you look at it closely, it's basically nepotism.
Yeah. Well, and his family came out so strongly against him. I mean, I don't think there was anybody who supported him. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, Doctor. So let's move on to the fourth question. What underlying demographic and regional shifts most significantly influence the 2024 election results? So demographic. So I heard that about the ethnic. How do you say it? The racial demographics, of course, has affected heavily on this election. And with the how do you say, the Hispanic voters shifted more Republican over the years, especially in Florida and other states. And basically, I think it's something that is quite I don't know. I think how to say, shocking. I don't think so, but really, I want to know your opinion on this. Can you elaborate more on this particular question?
Yeah, sure. So this is an important question and one we are still digging into and trying to figure out. But it is clear that there was a very major shift, especially among Hispanic men, but also among Black men, shifting towards Trump in 2024 from their vote in 2020. I looked up quickly just some statistics on this, and Hispanic men had a 35-point shift to Trump in 2024 from 2020. So they went from supporting Biden by 34 points to supporting Trump by 1 point in the 2024 election, which is huge. Black men also had a 35-point shift, but they still voted for the Democrats. So they went from 82 points for Biden in 2020 to 47 points for Harris in 2024. So there's a big jump, but they still voted Democratic. Okay, so that's men. White men only shifted 5 points. Nonetheless, and then looking at women, Black women and white women basically were constant between the two elections. They didn't shift. Hispanic women shifted by 19 points towards so less democratic, but still pro-democratic, right? This is really an important thing that's happening, and I think it's something that the Democrats have to consider strongly in how they move forward, and that is a lot of people of color in the United States are economically liberal, but more socially conservative. And as the Democratic Party has started really focusing very heavily on social liberalism instead of economic liberalism, their message they work on both, but their messaging is really about being socially liberal, being pro social justice, and being pro gender. Having a variety of gender identities and really emphasizing racial issues in the United States. I think they've turned off a lot of more socially conservative people, especially Hispanics who are quite socially conservative, especially on like the abortion issue. And so I see that shift. The thing that makes it a bit confusing is that a lot of the anger in the United States against Biden was because of immigration. But I think a lot of Hispanics and Latinos who live in the United States and have lived here for a while are very upset about the number of immigrants coming into the country. They don't like the fact that all of these immigrants from South and Central America and Mexico are coming into the country. I can kind of see that shift going on, and it is an important one. So just as you said, it's extremely important. Yeah. And it's going to have long-term ramifications if the Democrats don't figure out how to turn this around.
You see, well, I don't actually I'm not saying I'm not that well aware, but really is something that I'm not that particularly focused on this racial demographics based results. But really, I do see it very significantly, especially in Florida, because Florida has one of the largest Hispanic population. Of course, its former Senator Marco Rubio himself is Hispanic, Cuban, especially. So yeah, I think that uh, this actually is important. I do have to agree. I agree with you that this type of demographic is something that should be studied more, because it is something that is happening and should be learned more. So
If I could just throw in there, I mean, Cuban Americans have voted Republican forever. They're the most Republican Hispanic bloc of all. So we can't. We talk about Hispanics and Latinos as one group, but they aren't. It really depends where they come from. And Cuban Americans have just been very conservative, very Republican for a long time.
see, well, yeah, I mean, the results was something that is shocking, and actually, when we were following live the election results, and when we saw the percentage of the election in Florida, I still remember, because it's an indicator of for me that Donald Trump will win only by seeing Florida. Was at the time I was checking the live results, and Trump was leading in Florida. Of course, he's always leading there. He's leading with 56%. That
Exactly.
number stuck with me. It feels like, oh my God, I think he will win re-election, in my opinion. So yeah, I think Florida is like an indicator. Of course, it's not a bellwether anymore, but it's an early indicator for me. So yeah. Um let's move on to the fifth question, the last question, Doctor. Okay, so the fifth question would go a little abroad, a little broad. What does the outcome of the 2024 election signal about the long-term trajectory of American political institutions, party coalitions, and democratic stability? Basically, the implications of these elections. What do you think, Doctor?
Yeah, so I think for party coalitions, I think it's a big, that's a big one. I One question that I have is that it's unclear to me how much of the Republican vote is because there is a core group of Republicans who just love Donald Trump, and they are not kind of the traditional Republican voters, but they are becoming more so. They voted for Obama, right? And then they voted for Obama in 2012, and then they voted for Trump in 2016. So I think there's there's something about some Americans who just adore Donald Trump. And I always think, once Donald Trump is not on the ticket, will the Republican Party have such an appeal to these voters, or will they just simply not participate anymore? I don't know what will happen. So I don't know. But that coalition is a bit tentative to me. And there are a lot of Republicans who kind of wonder about Donald Trump and what he's doing to the economy. On the Democratic side, I think that's the group that has the most to think about. They really need to try to broaden their base. They need to try to appeal to a broader range of especially middle Americans and try to get that figured out. In terms of institutions, Americans have disapproved of the institutions for a long time. They don't like our government institutions. They don't like big government. And so I think it's really fascinating to think if right now Donald Trump is really focused on trying to downsize the American government, cutting a lot of parts of our government. And I think that is going to hit Americans kind of hard. They don't want big government, but they don't want to see their Social Security cut or their Medicare cut or their Medicaid cut or any of that stuff. They want government to work, and they're going to see it not working. So I think it could have an institutional impact in terms of a backlash. I think Americans will be upset with what happens. And then the last part of the question is about democratic stability, and obviously that to me is the most pressing question. Like, are we? So one possible, there are people who say, our democracy is quite resilient, and we will be able to weather this, and we'll come out stronger at the end. And there could even be a backlash in favor of democracy out of all of this. But I have never in my career, and I've been teaching for a long time, I've never had to defend the importance of democracy to my students until the last couple of years, and now I have to defend it to my students, and I find that appalling. It's like, do you understand that if we had a dictator, the dictator might not agree with what you believe, and then you can't get rid of them because they're in office forever. I mean, I just don't get the argument against democracy. I know democracy is messy. It is inefficient, it all that stuff, but it's also the most beautiful system that we have. And I do fear that we are undermining the rule of law. What I'm concerned about is not just the ruining of democracy, but specifically the ruining of liberal democracy, where we believe in individual rights and individual freedoms, and we have a system set up to protect people from government infringement on those rights and freedoms.
I see. Um, yeah, I do believe as well that democracy is the backbone of America. So it is not something that people should be fighting about, because democracy is something that has been embedded in the culture of the US since its foundation. So really, to have this type of leader that seeks to undermine it, and especially with court orders defying it and trying to do something that he believed would do something, but in reality it does not. Like executive orders. So what do you think about Trump's executive orders, doctors? Do you think that his executive order is something that actually effective, or does it actually does not? What do you think?
So, presidents have been trying to run our government through executive orders for a long time. It used to be that Congress was more functional, and actually passed legislation. And, it went through the normal system where Congress would act and then the president would veto or not veto the bill and, blah, blah, blah. But presidents have had trouble with Congress ever since we became more polarized, ever since 1994, really. And so now Congress has become quite dysfunctional. And that leaves it to presidents to to sign executive orders to address issues that they want to see done. The problem with executive orders is that they are temporary in the sense that whoever the next president is can just overturn whatever executive orders were. They can't do that with legislation. So if Congress passed legislation, the next president can't just overturn it. But executive orders can just be overturned. So when Biden came into office in 2020, he immediately overturned a lot of Trump's executive orders. When Trump came into office this year in 2025, he immediately overturned Biden's executive orders. It's just a horrible, unstable, chaotic way to run government. So it is a problem. It is a huge problem. And, executive orders can be done in the short term. There isn't much control of it. Congress would need to act, in terms of your specific question, Congress would need to act to ensure that the rule of law is followed, that Trump doesn't, just deport people without due process, so Congress would need to act. And I just don't see Republicans in Congress, who now control both the House and Senate, I just don't see them doing that. They seem either afraid of Donald Trump or they just agree with him, which I think is a lot of it. They just agree with him on a lot of things he's doing.
I see. Well, yeah, I do think that as well. What I'm curious about is recently the news just came in this morning, and I don't know, the American time, I think night, early morning today. So the President Trump's tariffs have been blocked by the court, by the trade court. So this is a quite huge development, basically, like this court order. So what do you think the trajectory of this situation? What do you think? Do you think Trump will obey it, defy it, or just like what he does like previously? What do you think, Doctor?
So, it's interesting because sometimes Trump defies court orders and sometimes he doesn't. And I haven't quite figured out the pattern yet of when he decides to back down and when he decides to just ignore what the courts say. He believes so strongly in tariffs. I mean, he was pro tariffs when he ran in his first term, and he's pro tariffs now. So I think this is one where he will simply either defy the court or get Congress to move on this so that it becomes a legislation. I don't know. I mean, I don't think there are enough people who are. So I'm in Nebraska. We're a very strong agricultural state, and tariffs hurt agriculture. So what happened in Trump's first term is that he imposed all these tariffs. Agriculture got hit hard, and then he bailed out agricultural areas with government funds. He's saying he'll do the same thing now, and yet a lot of Republicans are concerned about the size of our deficit. I'm just like, I just don't see how this plays out. I can't see Republicans being pro bailing out agriculture because of the tariffs. I'm not sure. I do think he will continue just to impose tariffs because that's what he wants.
I see. Well, maybe let's. I do want to ask about, and also recently, this morning as well, Elon Musk has exited the government. So I think it's also a huge development, something that I do not expect as well. But well, I don't expect it to happen now. But he said in the past he will leave eventually. So I want to ask you about the cuts that he made in the government. So many people have suffered in the U.S., especially. The federal workers have been laid off. Many of them have been uh, left unemployed in several states, especially like I saw a CNN report in West Virginia. uh, 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 a pro-Trump supporter, this woman, and then she was let go. So she thought otherwise about Trump now. So what do you think, Doctor? This is something that is quite huge because the cuts that the Doge made is really something that is concerning because many people have relied on this work on these jobs. Many people have working for the federal government in especially in the rural states like West Virginia and any other states. What do you think, Doctor?
Yeah, I think the Doge cuts were big, and they also created a lot of chaos. You know, Doge would make, propose these cuts, and they would go into effect, and then they'd realize, oh, gee, we're letting go all sorts of people who actually are experts and know what they were doing, and we need that expertise in government. Gosh, isn't that bad? But there are other parts of the government where they just were let go, and that's it. And it is, it's a problem. So I think about, so now Elon Musk has said that he is opposed to the big beautiful budget bill that was just passed, and um, to me, it's not so. It was surprising in the sense that he's now coming out so publicly against it. But there's also a logic to it. So he's very opposed to having a huge deficit. He thinks that the huge deficit will affect future generations in a bad way, and affects even our country right now in a bad way. It puts us at the mercy of a lot of people who hold our debt, right? So I can see him being concerned about that. I am a little surprised that he came out so publicly against Trump on this. He must be on the outs with Trump because otherwise he wouldn't have said it. Uh, but if you think about what the big beautiful budget bill did, it's going to increase our national debt by a huge amount, by like $2.2 trillion or something like that, and Musk is not in favor of increasing taxes on the wealthy. So a way to get rid of the deficit is to increase taxes on the wealthy. And he's opposed to that. So he wants to just cut government. The big beautiful budget bill just kind of cut a lot of taxes, but didn't do anything to make up the lost revenue. It kept in a lot of programs that will cost money. So I think Elon Musk is just upset about how it's looking right now.
I see. Last question. For like this part of question, I don't think it's related, but something that is critical. The last one. About the role. Wait, let me think. I forgot the question, but uh, it was something. The role. Oh my God, I forgot the question. Um, it was important, like education department.
Mhm.
Do you think that Donald Trump could actually abolish the Department of Education because they have facilitated like mass firings and the reduction of the department itself because I do think that it is something that I don't know, the sentiment is actually being shared historically by the Republicans as well. Like when I checked about how the Department of Education was founded during the presidency of Jimmy Carter, um, actually many Republicans opposed it in the Congress. So I do think that this sentiment will only grow larger over the years. And now of course, Donald Trump is taking this huge action, like a big agenda for him, something that the Republicans support to abolish this Department of Education. So, do you think that he will succeed in this term of his?
Yeah. So you're right that Jimmy Carter put the Department of Education in place, and Republicans did not like it. When Ronald Reagan was elected in 1980, he ran on the idea that he was going to get rid of the Department of Education. He put in place a secretary for that department whose job was to basically get rid of the Department of Education. And instead, that secretary got, started supporting the department, and Reagan could never get rid of it. So it's been, the idea of getting rid of the Department of Education has been around for a long time. So some of the background on why that is. So the United States, we have federalism in our country, and there are some things that are left to the national government, but a lot of things are left to state and local governments. And the view has always been historically that education is a state level or local level issue. So states and local levels are the ones who run the education systems in any given state, and that it has no place for the federal government to get involved. How dare the federal government tell us what we ought to teach or what we ought to be doing? And I think that especially since the Department of Education has promoted things like anti-discrimination policies, so we can't have discrimination in education, and other types of policies. The Republicans have been opposed to those because they think it's just misguided. It's up to the states to do this. Of all of the departments, I think that's the one that has the most likelihood of going. It's hard to get rid of. It's really hard to get rid of a department once it's in place. It gets kind of embedded. It has a lot of people who support it, and so they're going to be arguing for it. I mean, I don't know how this will play out. But of all the departments, I think this is the most vulnerable.
I see. Well, I do have agree with you that, yeah, I mean, I like to highlight how different it is with Malaysia and the United States, apart from having a similar design flag. But of course, there are differences, of course, in the government. We have a king, we have a prime minister, we follow the British system. And actually, unlike in the United States, like having these fixed departments, we have actually like very versatile ministries in which they can rename it, they can like merge it, they can establish a new one. So basically, it's something that is quite interesting in
Yeah.
my opinion. But of course, but yeah, I don't know if it's something that is would be applicable to US like our system did. What do you think, Doctor? Do you think that our system could be something that is be effective to the US?
So, I mean, it could never happen. So just on kind of a basic level, our country would never vote for constitutional amendments that approve that. I think I teach a democracy and citizenship class in which I cover majoritarian systems versus proportional systems, and yours is a majoritarian system. So whichever party wins in the parliament, they get to do kind of whatever they want. They've gotten the vote of the people, and they get to do what they want. In our system, we're a mix of majoritarian and proportional, and so and we have a system set up to try to keep the government from becoming too big and imposing itself too much on the people. So the framers of our Constitution really wanted government to be kept in check, and as such, I just don't see the Americans here approving of having government not quite have that check on their power that we seem to value a lot. Although, I mean, you can see that in the current situation with Trump and trying to get a lot of stuff done. And the courts keep stepping in and saying, no, you can't do that. That's a check on government power, right? So I think Americans actually like that, even though right now Republicans are probably really mad at the courts. But I think overall Americans kind of like that check on government power.
I see. Well, I think that would be all. Thank you, Doctor, for that answers to all of the guided questions that have been prepared.
You bet.
So yeah, I think it is time for us to move on to the long-awaited Q&A session by our participants tonight. So I do think that I have laid out the rules for the participants to ask the question. I would prioritize first the participant that wanted to inquire to open your mic. We prioritize verbal question rather than in the chat box. So if there anyone that wanted to open their mic or preferably to open their uh, camera, you are welcome to do so. So let's begin our Q&A session. Any questions from our participants?
Greetings, Doctor. Am I audible?
Hello?
Hello?
Greetings. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So actually, I have a rather interesting question in regard to the general swing of the election, general swing towards Trump, because what I noticed is that in 2024, all 50 of the states swung towards Trump, which I think is unprecedented because previously, even in, let's say, for example, the 2016 election, there were several states that swung towards the then Democratic candidate Hillary, like among others, Texas, Washington, Illinois, Utah. And one book that is noteworthy is that in 2024, Kamala didn't even flip a county that voted Republican back in 2020 to the Democratic column. What I found is that the closest she came to doing so was in Grand County, Colorado, where she lost the county by a mere 79 votes. Actually, I'm interested to given the rather moderately sized popular vote swing towards Trump in 2024 compared to 2020. I am curious to see how such a scenario manifested, as in like every single state swung to the right, and not a single county flipped to the Democratic side.
Yeah. The graphics on the county level vote swings are amazing. I mean, it is so much to the right. On the other hand, there was a huge swing to the left in 2020. So we saw in 2020 a big swing to the left because a lot of people were upset with Trump. And then we see a huge swing in 2024 because a lot of people are upset with Biden. So I think right now, so one of the things that really sets our time in history apart is that we are so closely divided that we end up getting just anything can shift things either way. Partisans again tend to vote for their party. That's how it plays out. But independents are a big portion. They make up about 40% of the electorate right now, and so they make up a big portion. And the way they can swing in ways that we might not be able to predict. I do think what I said at the beginning, the state of the economy and the approval of the sitting president really matters a lot. And in 2024, that went against Biden. In 2020, that went against Trump.
Well, I hope that answered your question. Zarif?
Yes, yes, definitely. Thank you, Doctor. And I have another question. Let me think, because because another thing I noticed is that the pro Trump swing in 2024 was seen the least in Western states with no significant Hispanic population. So, for example, like I believe the four states where where the swing to Trump was the least pronounced were in Washington, Oregon, Utah, and Colorado.
Yeah.
I wonder why that is the case when massive pro-Trump swings were recorded in the Midwest, and although you mentioned the Hispanic factor beforehand in states with significant Hispanic populations like Nevada, Arizona, and California.
Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right. I think that Hispanic populations are a big part of the explanation. As I mentioned, Hispanic men really moved strongly towards Trump. I do think that the West is. I don't know if you've ever been to the United States, but the different parts of our country vary widely. So the West is much more kind of independent. Um, they like to feel that their independence and freedom are what matter. It's kind of almost a more libertarian approach to politics in a lot of the West. And so it's individualism, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, that kind of a mentality. And I think a lot of people uh, don't want didn't like the Democrats trying to tell them how to think and to talk and to feel about things. And so there was a backlash against that. I also just think it's social conservatism versus social liberalism, and I do think the two parties have both taken strong stances on that, and I think that the results of the election showed to some extent that social conservatism is more popular, especially in the Western states, than social liberalism.
Okay, Zarif, would that answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Okay, awesome. So we have actually a question in the chat box by Gio. So yeah, Gio is actually um one of the higher ups in the political science society here in UUM. So I really appreciate his assistance of helping to promote this sharing session with another students for to participate in this engagement. So Gio asked, did you expect Trump to win, and are Americans happy with that so far?
So I did expect Trump would win. I was I guess, one of the few people who really thought it and thought it for quite a long time. Um, are Americans happy with that now? I mean, his approval rating has gone down. He was above 50% when he got elected, but he is now more around 43% or so. So his approval rating has dropped. That suggests that people are less happy with him now than they were when they voted for him. It's also the case that there are some people who regret their vote, and they have come out very publicly to say that they regret their vote. But I think a lot of Americans are waiting to see what happens. So they're a little concerned. I would say the mood of the country is there among a lot of Americans. They're a little concerned, but they have a wait and see attitude to see if his approach is positive for the country. Democrats are just going crazy. They hate what Trump is doing, and they're protesting constantly and speaking out against Trump. But I think most Americans have a wait and see attitude.
Okay, so we don't have actually any other questions. So I think I will just ask the question to you if that's okay with you. So there's a lot of things in this election, and really it really affected of how it affected the international community, especially in Malaysia. Um, so what do you think of the international foreign policy direction of the US currently, and with the current development, especially in Harvard University, in which Donald Trump has like banned foreign students to actually study, and it actually received a huge backlash, especially from other foreign nations. So, what do you think, Doctor, in this matter?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Most Americans don't care about foreign policy. They just don't pay attention. They think presidents pay too much attention to foreign policy. They don't like it. Um, but among people who do pay attention to foreign policy, I think there is a lot of so kind of two-sided. On the pro-Trump side, there is a view that the United States has been putting too much emphasis on being a partner with foreign countries and not being a leader of foreign countries, and that we instead need to have we need to have we need to be the leader of the world and hammer things home and make things happen regardless what other countries think. It's also the case that a lot of Republicans have been upset with Europe because they think Europe is too liberal, and so they don't like the fact that we have been working a lot with Europeans. On the other side, which is, I think, the stronger view, there's a lot of concern that Trump is dismantling a lot of things that gave us a lot of positive feelings around the world. Not universally. A lot of people don't like the United States, but just a more positive feeling because we were working with other people. We were working with Europe. We were working with people in different parts of the world. And I think there's now fear that we have destabilized that. Trump has long wanted to get out of NATO, and he could decide to withdraw us from NATO. That would be a huge mistake. There's a lot of concern about China and what China is doing in that part of the world, in the East Asian part of the world, and the United States is just making a lot of our allies mad, and that doesn't help. So it's kind of weakening the world in a way that is troubling. And as far as Harvard University goes, I mean, I honestly, I'm just befuddled by that. I don't understand the desire to destroy Harvard University and to not allow foreign students to get visas to come to our country to study. I mean, one of the best things is when people come to our country and they see that we're not evil, bad people. We're actually pretty nice, and we care about learning and research, and we want to spread what we know to everybody. And so I find that really troubling. I think it will have long-term negative impacts.
I see. Well, we actually have another question by Akif Maslan. He asked about, maybe this is a hypothetical question, but could an earlier transition to Kamala Harris have changed the outcome? Was the Democratic Party adequately prepared for this contingency?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the major what if question. A lot of people wonder if Biden had dropped out and said he wasn't going to run for a second term, and we had the normal primary season, and Kamala Harris won. Could she have won the presidency? I mean, I tend to think not. I think that regardless who the candidate was, the Republican would have won. But I do think that there's enough anti-Trump sentiment that a good Democratic candidate could have run a strong campaign against Trump and maybe won. I mean, I do think that's a possible. It is a what if question. We'll never know. I do think that I do think Biden not dropping out, not deciding to early to not run for a second term, that did have a negative impact in major ways.
I see. Thank you for that. We have two questions from Akmal. How does America currently view the war in Ukraine, especially considering that former President Trump says he wants peace, yet it doesn't seem likely to happen anytime soon? What do you think, Doctor?
Yeah, Ukraine is really interesting. I don't quite understand. The United States was very much supportive of Ukraine, and was with Europe to try to keep Russia from just encroaching into Europe, and so further into Europe. So I do think I just don't quite understand Ukraine right now. What is the Americans' attitude towards Ukraine? It's very divided along party lines. Democrats think we should be supporting Ukraine. Republicans think that we shouldn't, that we really need to focus on what's happening at home and not spend any more money overseas on this kind of thing. Donald Trump seems to waver between being friends with Putin and being mad at Putin. And obviously he was mad at Zelensky for a while there, and now they seem to be. I mean, I just don't get it. So what do I think will happen in the longer term? I do think that Trump said he would get a peace deal on the table, by day one or whatever of his administration. It's not happening, and the truth of the matter is, as you all know, it's hard to get countries to stop fighting. It's hard to come up with deals. It's not easy to get people to the table, and so I think that we will see Europe increasingly take over helping Ukraine, because I think the U.S. will drop the ball on it.
I see. Thank you for that. Yeah, I do agree with you because when Trump came to office, it's like a total shift from supporting Ukraine, pro-Ukraine, and then suddenly like, who are you, Ukraine? You forgot to say thank you. I thought that was funny to me. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's actually another question. From maybe let's prioritize another question by Zarif, the earlier questioner. He's actually a law student, my friend. We talk a lot about American politics. Actually, he's a law student currently. So his question was about his interest in seeing the Muslim shift in voting. So I think this is something that quite resonate with us because, as Malaysians are majority Muslims, including me, and I think most of the attendees here. So prior to 9/11, Muslims were historically a pro-Republican bloc, but they swung heavily Democratic in all elections from 2004 to 2020. And the Democratic Party, from my observation, however, wavered to the Gaza issue in 2024, created an opening for Republicans to take advantage of this and the general conservatism of the Muslim American community to win the vote in 2024. Like in the city of Dearborn, a hotbed of Muslim Americans swung from voting 80% Democratic in 2024 to voting Republican by approximately 50% to 15% margin. He wondered if this shift is lasting in nature or it's just a one-time thing caused by the lack of Muslim faith in the Biden presidency in regard to the Gaza situation. Does Islamophobia, especially from the Republican side, play a role here?
Yeah, so I was as I was living through the 2024 election, a lot of Democrats were very upset with what was happening in Gaza and in Israel, and they wanted Kamala Harris to come out as very pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel, and she would not do that. She kept saying, I'm for the Palestinians, but I'm also for Israel. And a lot of people thought that was a very weak answer, right? It was a politically, I don't see how she could have said anything else, given the United States' relationship with Israel. But it was definitely something that a lot of Muslims did not want to hear. It seemed like a real slap in the face of Muslims around the world if she wasn't willing to see that Israel could do bad things, right? So a lot of people either didn't vote, Muslims didn't vote, or they voted for the Republican. I was curious about that, though, because it's not as if Donald Trump's stand on Israel and the Palestinians is better than Harris's. I mean, in a lot of ways, Trump is just 100% for Israel and doesn't care about what happens to Palestinians. So I don't see the shift as a long-term shift because I can't imagine that people in Dearborn, Michigan think what's going on now is a good thing. I mean, what's happening in Gaza is a human rights tragedy. I mean, it's just so awful. So I think that probably if a Democrat were in office, if Harris were in office now, she would be trying really hard to get Israel to stop this. It's really awful. So I can't see Muslims long term thinking that what the Republican approach to issues around the world that involve Muslims, that it's a positive step.
I see. Well, we are actually here in Malaysia is very pro-Palestine. We actually don't have any relations with Israel, and actually in our passport actually said in our passport, this passport is valid for all countries except Israel. So basically we are one of the most hostile country when it comes to the relations of Israel.
Mhm.
So I think that would be the end of that question. So this question is like the perfect question to end this Q&A session, in my opinion. The last question: do you think the next president is Republican or a Democrat in 2028?
That's a really hard question. So I think, as I said, I think the Democrats have a problem. And the problem is that they are even more disliked than the Republicans right now. So I think that's a problem for Democrats. They have to figure out how to appeal to a broader range of people and not be seen as a very, very narrow party that only cares about social justice issues. I really think they have to think broadly. I've said for a long time that I think that the Democrats are best poised to deal with income inequality issues, which are becoming huge in this country. They're going to be even huger after a Trump presidency. And I think they could reach out to a broader range of Americans if they focused more on income inequality than on a lot of the social justice issues that they do. The Republicans are going to have a hard time if Trump's approach hurts the United States economically in terms of foreign policy, if a lot of people see that they don't like inefficient and ineffective government. And so he's going to have to deal with the Republican Party will have to deal with the aftermath of that. So I think there's a good chance that the Democrats could win in the next election in 2028. So I'll put my finger on the Democratic side, but if Trump is really successful, then no, then it'll be a Republican.
I see. Well, I don't want to drag this session, but I really want to learn more. Maybe a last question from me. Maybe you could share about the who are when you say the Democrat would have the chance to win the next presidential election. Do you think what do you think the right brand for the president for the Democrats? What is the right brand to represent Democratic Party in the next presidential election? Do we need a progressive brand, a mainstream brand, or a moderate brand? Like I am thinking currently like Bernie Sanders. I don't think he would run again because he's like super old. Uh, like maybe governor of Kentucky and the Bashir, a brand of the moderate, or maybe someone from the mainstream like Cory Booker. What do you think, Doctor?
So already there are a lot of Democrats who are positioning themselves to be the next Democratic candidate. And the names you mentioned are there. Pete Buttigieg is obviously trying to get his name in there. Gretchen Whitmer. So there are a lot of people who are trying to get their name out there and to be positive. I think that I mean this whole idea of whether it should be the progressive side of the party or the more moderate side of the party. I think that is going to be the big push, and I know a lot of people who argue strongly for the progressive side of the party because they believe in the progressive issues. My own view is that to appeal to the Democrats just have to get a broader base. They just have to. They can't win if they don't. And they have to be able to win in Middle America. They have to, in Nebraska, they have to appeal to more people in Nebraska. And that's tough. I mean, or in Iowa, as you said, how they have to appeal to people in Middle America, and they aren't right now. So is there a candidate who can broaden their base? In a sense, if you think about, from extremely liberal to extremely conservative, the people who are extremely liberal have no place to go if the Democrats decide to pick a moderate. But moderates, if the Democrats decide to go with the far left, the moderates can decide to go with the Republican. So I think there's more of an argument if we believe in Anthony Downs and the whole idea that you have to move to the middle. I mean, there's something to his argument, and I would say probably Democrats would have more success moving to the middle. But who knows? I mean, I just don't know what's going to happen over the next 3 years. It's completely up in the air to me.
I see. Well, I can argue with you on that because yeah, I mean it's still early. It's still the first year of Donald Trump's second presidency, and yeah, I'm still writing on my thesis, my final year thesis on the second presidency of Donald Trump specifically, and really I need really more inputs on this. But yeah, following the developments is it's actually interesting. So I think my thesis will be something that is interesting as well. So yeah. Um, okay, so I think that would be the end of the sharing session for uh this engagement. So thank you, Dr. Theiss-Morse, for sharing your views, for your opinions, academic opinions. It really is something that we value so much. Unfortunately, I have talked with the dean, and she said that she could not make it. She is truly busy, and yeah, really, she was actually the lecturer for American politics and foreign policy. She taught me in the last semester. So yeah, she would really love this. Uh, she would really love to attend this. I assure you. But she is the dean now, and you know how the responsibilities goes. So yeah, she doesn't have the time.
I understand.
So yeah. So yeah, I do maybe like want to know like maybe some of us maybe want to continue studying the US, and do you have any inputs on the University of Nebraska at Lincoln? Do you think that maybe people like me, like us here, can further our studies, especially in political science or international relations in postgraduate studies? What do you think, Doctor? Do you have any plans?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. No, we have quite a few foreign students who come to University of Nebraska Lincoln to do their graduate work, and we have a very collegial, nice department, and I think students there enjoy it. And so, yeah, I I encourage you to apply when the time comes. Maybe we will be allowing student visas again by then.
Yeah, Doctor. So yeah, I myself really wanted to pursue my studies in the US, especially in PhD. But I checked a lot, including University of Nebraska Lincoln. I checked that the university doesn't offer PhD in political science. Is that correct, Doctor, or it's just
No, we
master?
no, we do a PhD.
Oh, I see. Well, I guess it's in my options now. Yes. So yeah, I think really I really love American politics. I am very passionate about it. Since I was a young teenager, American politics is all what I'm thinking about. So yeah, I mean, I hope this sharing will help some of the attendants, some of the attendees here can would learn valuable lessons and gain very useful inputs. Because yeah, this sharing is very critical because we don't in Malaysia, we don't actually hear much from the US itself about their current political situations, how their opinions can vary with the government. So yeah, it's something that Malaysia should know. And as like what our dean said, I quoted her. She said that if you like America or not, you must learn about them.
Sure.
So yes, I think
Yeah.
it's something that deeply resonate with me personally, and I hope that it will be resonated deeply with the others here too.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah,
if anybody has any questions, just send me an email. I'm happy to answer any questions people have.
yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, I think I will let the participants know about your availability on this matter because yeah, you have been very helpful, been very open to discuss about this. So I think that that would be the end of it, and I think that maybe you can get take a photo. Maybe those who can open the camera to open your camera and get ready to take a photo together with Dr. Theiss-Morse. Um, Anyone that could open your camera could maybe open your camera and that's okay. Okay, let me begin. Okay, one, two, 1, 2, 3. Okay, let me do this and then okay. Hey, wait. Okay. Okay, I think okay, I think that will be the end of it. Okay,
Excellent.
yeah.
Well,
Sorry,
thank you so much for inviting me to do this. It was a lot of fun.
yeah, it is to me too because yeah, I mean, I did actually interview many several experts, so but I don't actually held a talk before with participants joining in.
Sure.
But yeah, this is something new to me as well. So I hope that you enjoyed. I
It
really
was
happy to.
fun, and good luck on your thesis.
Thank you, doctor. So I think that would be the end of it, and let me end the recording. I think so yeah, thank you, doctor. I hope that we can see you again in the future, and
Sounds good.
we will get in touch with you very soon.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you,
Bye.
doctor.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for taking your time to speak to us in regard to American politics in Indonesia. Go Huskers!
Yeah, go Huskers. There you go. Bye-bye.
Participants can leave the meeting. Thank you.